All right, welcome, boys and girls, to another episode of the IDP Plus podcast. And we have in store for you today, we are kind of reviewing and holding ourselves accountable to the edge rusher sort of tiered rankings that we did for the 2023 season. We kind of cherry picked a list of 20 guys to go over prior to the season. We place them into tiers, our whole staff. So we're going to show you mine and Matt's tiers and kind of just review what went to the season and project them going forward. So Matt, welcome. Playoffs have started. How's things going?
Yeah, it is absolutely great to be here. We got to hold ourselves accountable. If we won't, who else will? I feel like in the fantasy community, a lot of folks don't like to look back on what they did. They only look forward, right? But
Yeah.
our lovely listeners and viewers, you deserve to see what we got right, what we got wrong, try to make heads or tails of, why we got some things wrong and kind of look forward to the future. And yeah, quite a fun first weekend of playoff games. Obviously, we
Mhm.
are, or a little peek behind the curtain, we are recording this on Monday. So there are still a couple of games to go, but I feel like there weren't many. There's one good game, obviously the Lions and the
Yeah.
Rams. The
Oh,
rest of them, albeit some surprising outcomes, but
yeah.
weren't the best thing to necessarily watch. But as always, we are brought to you by our lovely friends at Trophy Smack. They
Ooh.
have everything you need. Everything you need. We obviously talk about them in the fantasy football lens. We got if you're watching on YouTube, we got these sweet belts. These things are legit. They got sweet championship rings here. But they
Look at
have
that.
wall art. They have fantasy loser things, and they don't do just football stuff. I know the fantasy football season just ended, but they do, you know, uh, current times, wall art, popular things. They do all the other sports. So really, anything you could possibly need, go over to TrophySmack.com. Check them out. Use code IDP guys at checkout if you're getting a belt, a custom belt, or a
Mhm.
custom trophy. Get yourself a free one of these rings for yourself.
Hell,
Again, code IDP guys at checkout.
sweet. Yeah, I mean, you could get like if you have a cornhole league, right? You could get a belt made for that or something, right? That's what's so cool
Oh
about it.
yeah.
Not
Cool.
just fantasy football, but I love all their loser punishment stuff too. The
Oh yeah.
the leotard, the toilet seats, like they have some really cool like for the people that lose your league. Yeah, they have some really cool stuff
Ah,
there.
the
So
singlet's hilarious.
yes, it is. All right, we're gonna jump in here. We're gonna start top down. So we're gonna talk about your most exciting guys from tier one that we had placed there, and kind of just recap what we think sort of happened and led them to these finishes, and what we think going forward here. So Mr. Michael Parsons. So he was sort of a consensus for the most part overall. Number one IDP pick. Now, again, that is to be said in leagues that reward, sacks and pass rushers, sort of on the aggressive end. It was the case for Parsons. The scoring that we have listed here and the finishes we have listed here are from more of like a balanced perspective. So we had sacks scoring 4 points, QB hits one, solo tackles two, assists I believe were one also.
Mhm.
So that's why you kind of see the points per game finishes listed the way they are. But Mr. Michael Parsons, I was notably very anti choosing him as your first overall IDP player. So the big name value. Now we in our scoring here, he finished ninth, just under 13 points a game, 12.76. So not terrible, but also in my eyes, very valid. Feel validated with the take that he was not worth the number one overall IDP selection. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like all these tier one names, if you're drafting someone
Yeah,
in this tier, you're just expecting them to end up, you know,
yeah,
top 10. Like, yeah, like
yeah,
why they are so high? Because I mean, it's fantasy football, right? The best
yeah.
of the best, they fluctuate. You want some consistency, but you're drafting them for hopefully their floor, and then their ceiling of being one of those top guys. So we
Mhm.
often, and we, as we start getting into more draft strategy stuff, as the fantasy off season rolls on. Uh, the strategy that we often talk about is you really don't want to be the first picking
Mhm.
any position. Obviously, depending where you are in the draft, certain things fall to you, and depending on your strategy. But yeah, especially on the defensive side, like right, you don't want to be the first one in there because the only thing they can do is disappoint you when they're the first one
Right.
overall. So Parsons, we talked about it at length, but for some of our new listeners, where he lines up, he's really splash play dependent. He doesn't really have a floor of tackles
Mm-hmm.
that some of these other guys have. And again, you watch these games, and he has an impact on the game, but he doesn't necessarily get the stats that give you points in fantasy. Granted, he finished ninth, so if you ended up taking him, that he was fine, and it's fun to watch. Because even in this playoff game yesterday, I was talking to some friends, and they're like, "Oh, Parsons really didn't show up in this game." Like he did actually. He was all up in Jordan Love's face. It's just Love was throwing dimes off his back foot to wide receivers that no one was covering. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like he was impacting the game. It just didn't lead to fantasy points. So yes, you were correct. He should not have been the 101 IDP player, except for maybe in best ball. Maybe you can maybe rationalize it, but the
Right.
ninth overall finish, that's fine. That's fine. He'll
Oh yeah.
still be on these tier
No.
ones moving forward. But
Yeah.
but yeah, there are definitely some safer picks than good
Right.
old friend Micah Parsons.
And that's all I was trying to hammer through. Will always remain in the elite first tier. It's just you got to temper back your expectations. He played overwhelmingly 801 of his 911 snaps on the defensive line, hand in the dirt. Only about 108 of his snaps this year came from a more linebacker type position, dropping back in coverage. Now, he did have the most sacks of his career, 14, after 13 and 13 and a half. So technically, improving, but also the least amount of combined and solo tackles. So he started his career with 84, dropped way down to 65, and then had 64 this year. Solos went 64, 42, and just 36 this year. So that is all we're trying to hammer home is that tackle floor. If you're not in leagues that, ridiculously reward the sack or the QB hit or the tackle for loss, then you should never be taking Micah Parsons as the 101 in more tackle heavy or balanced leagues. And that's just kind of the cold hard truth. So with that being said, I think we can transition here to the next guy on the list, Nick Bosa, who finished 15th at just under 12 points a game, about 11 and a half points per game. Definitely felt like he kind of took a slide this year too, right? I think the sack numbers were a little bit down. The tackle numbers were a little bit down. He came into the organization after a sort of stalled contract talks. So we think maybe, his slow start to the year could be attributed to maybe conditioning. He wasn't with the official team all offseason and all preseason. Pretty much came into cold start in week 1. So what do you think about Nick Bosa there, Matt?
Yeah, disappointing year from him. He was pretty solid on average. So he had a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
a slow start, but looking at his week to week production from an IDP perspective, he pretty much hit his average every week. Just we didn't get some of those explosive games that we would expect from someone like Nick Bosa. Granted, you can't help to like that consistency. That's why he'll probably continue to be tier 1 or very, very, very high tier 2 after
Right.
this down year. But consistent production at the edge position is so heckin' hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And these tier 1 guys especially, I don't think really any of them, none of the tier 1 guys disappointed from that
Nah.
consistency perspective. So that's why they're in tier 1. And yeah, we'll keep drafting them as such.
Yeah, the biggest thing that you can attribute to, 18 and a half sacks last year, a career high, down to 10 and a half. So when you lose, minimum of 30 or so points per game to that drop off in sacks, then of course he's going to finish a little lower. The point is we've seen it. We know what he can do. And I would expect, regression to the mean there next year. So I'm not really moving him too far, especially in dynasty rankings. And yeah, he'll be among the top there next year as well. So yeah, not a lot of takeaway from Nick Bosa. I just think we can attribute the slow start to the beginning of the season with the contract stalls and the issues. Potential conditioning issues. That's just a big leap. Obviously, we don't have any cold hard facts on that, but tough to kind of explain away to anything else when he went the first couple of games definitely without a sack and lower tackle numbers. Tackle numbers stayed right pretty much on par. Solos dipped a bit as well, so the past 2 seasons he had 40, 41. We got down to 34 this year. It saw the assists go from 12 to 10 to all the way up to 19 this year, so that kind of eats into the lack of production as well. So however, he played the full season. We love to see that. So as long as he stays healthy here for the future, I really don't see him dipping too much in the rankings. Probably a little bit below Parsons. Like I'm probably still gonna have my top be Garrett, Crosby, Parsons, maybe. So Bosa kind of slides into maybe that 4 or 5 slot overall in Dynasty for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it feels right.
Yeah. All right. Then speaking of Myles Garrett, he was the next person. I think we kind of had them ranked within the tiers here, but so he comes up third, finished 11th this year, 12.625 points. So again, a really solid year. Of course, went missing for a few weeks, did get injured later in the season, didn't really officially miss time, but definitely felt like he was kind of limping to the finish line there. Probably fighting that injury. So again, he plays the full season. Another guy where I don't have huge takeaways here. Let's see where his numbers finished at. So
Nah, he's just so consistent. I have him for 14 sacks, 42 combined tackles, 4 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery. Just another solid year. To your point, he started off really, really hot. The Myles Garrett we sort of expect to see. The injury sort of hit him, and unfortunately, he did disappear in your fantasy playoffs. That obviously stings, but you have someone like Myles Garrett still finishing 11th overall points per game, even when he teared off there. So he's just the epitome of consistency. It's now the sixth straight year with double-digit sacks. His tackles are about average for what he'd get. So you're drafting him for that consistency, and one can make the, I think, pretty easy argument that if he didn't get hurt there, he's up there in the top 5 in terms of production. So another great year for him, and that's why he's in tier 1, because he's just a lock. He's just a lock for 10 plus sacks, and that's huge.
Yeah, right. And we know the PFF, that's been a hot kind of debate going around on Twitter again. He's a PFF darling. The grades love him, even more so than guys like TJ Watt, who we're going to talk about here in a second. But Myles Garrett was the top graded pass rusher this year by PFF overall. So he's the darling there. But just another guy that's not going anywhere. So I think we did really well with these tiers, at least the top ones here. So next on the list is one of our favorites, Mr. Max Crosby. Finished 3rd in points per game overall for this position group at just under 16 points at 15.882. Crosby he might be pushing for my number 1 dynasty guy just because
I don't know why you wouldn't.
He plays more snaps than anyone else at this position, which gives you this inherently built-in tackle floor, which is just phenomenal for fantasy. So I'm a huge fan. I love his personal life story, fighting addiction, coming out clean here, which being in the NFL, that could be, the odds are definitely stacked against you if you're an addict and fighting that. So the fact that he's come out on the other side and just been dominant here pretty much since his rookie year, definitely a personal favorite for me is Max Crosby. So
14 and a half sacks this year with 90 combined tackles, 23 tackles for a loss. That's insane. That's insanity. There's no reason why, and he hasn't missed a game since his rookie year, like
Yeah.
if he's not your number one guy, or at least up there, I don't know
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let other people. I mean, people will catch up. Obviously, people listening to
Right.
this, it's the off season. Y'all are smart. You're listening to us,
Mm.
but let people reach for the T.J. Watts and the Parsons. Obviously, T.J. Watt crushed it. All
Yeah.
that jazz. But like, let them go after the Nick Bosa, even Myles Garrett. Let Max Crosby fall to you at the 4th or 5th spot, and then just be smiling all the way.
The only reason I could think anyone would have him lower than like 2 would be, maybe their lack of seeing a ceiling for Crosby with the sacks. But I mean, 14 and a half, he just set his career high this year. So I think like people think like Parsons, Bosa, Garrett can all get to like 20, in
Right.
a great year. And I feel like people just don't think Crosby has that in him. But I don't know. I would disagree. And then with the ridiculous built-in tackle for, I mean, he just set a career high there too, with 90 combined. I mean, it's just insane, and you're just getting so much extra built-in points there that it's crazy. So yeah, Crosby is certainly a candidate for the number one overall edge player here going forward. But the guy who does hold the number one spot for most people is TJ Watt. So we'll move on to him. Finished first in points per game, 17 and a half, basically. Just another ridiculous year. I think the 3rd year that he's led the league in sacks in his career. So it seems to me you're most people, especially online, I'm getting a vibe of like, if you're not a Steelers fan, then you're like anti TJ Watt. Like I love this guy when he's healthy. Like he definitely deserves to be the 101. Now here's a guy who is deserving of the 101 in IDP leagues. That reward scoring appropriately for sure is a TJ Watt, because he's got a decent built-in tackle floor, and then the splash plays are just incredible. He's just a ball hawk. Not even talking about sacks, talking about interceptions, forcing fumbles, recovering fumbles, like all that jazz. He's just a monster when it comes to all that. So huge fan TJ Watt. He remains in the elite tier and 101 consideration every year, pretty much until he decides to hang him up, or we get some significant injury or a significant production fall off. So yeah, that was the concern, right? It's kind of why he was at the bottom of the first tier here. It's because, yeah, you got to kind of be a little concerned about injury and age there, especially coming off the injury from last year. But boy, did he reward all the people that got him, after all these first guys that went ahead of him, right?
Yeah, I mean, his whole thing is, will he stay healthy? Right?
Right.
Will he be healthy? When he's out there, he absolutely crushes. So this is
Yeah.
now 3 of the last 4 years where he stayed healthy for the majority of the games. He was healthy the entire season this year, and look what happens. Like, if you see the difference there between the 3rd overall score and the 1st, right? And Max Crosby and TJ Watt, it was the difference of almost a solid 2 points per week, which is
Yeah.
substantially higher. So the sky's the limit for TJ Watt. He's should be the 101 just for the consistency and the upside. You
Mhm.
always have to factor, or you don't have to, but there's always injury concern. But if anyone's earned the right to be kind of the consensus 101, uh,
Yeah.
especially in redraft, but yeah, even in dynasty, it's TJ Watt.
Yeah, because you could replace them. So even if you only get another 2 years, 3 years out of TJ Watt, if it's fully healthy, normal TJ Watt production years, then easily
Yeah,
worth the dynasty investment there. He feels like CMC to me on the IDP side, where like
yeah,
he's really only had like one bad year of injury. Yeah, he might have missed games here and there sporadically, but like the ceiling can just not be ignored. So yeah, I think come next year you'll probably see this go TJ Watt, Miles Garrett, or no, TJ Watt,
Crosby.
Crosby, Garrett, Bosa, Parsons, or Parsons Bosa.
Yeah, something
Something
like
like
that
that for us for next year, right?
for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, not don't want to spend too much time on these tier one guys because they all pretty much delivered. So, really, really nice job.
And hey,
I think.
golf clap for them. It's nice when
Yeah.
none of them get
Yeah.
get seriously injured, and we're not
Uh-huh.
talking about some of these next tier players. Like, yep, they were doing great until it was a nice year from that perspective, and that's why IDP is the best. That's why
Yeah.
IDP is the best.
So our next, we had a small tier two. So I'm just gonna say the names quickly. We had Brian Burns, Jalen Phillips, and Hassan Reddick in there, and kind of surprisingly, really only one guy was deserving in there. So we'll start with Jalen Phillips. Before the injury, finished fourth in points per
So
game. Yeah, brutal.
disappointing
Yeah,
of the
brutal injury. God.
injury.
Yeah.
That's where the issue was, right? Like fourth overall,
Mhm.
and we'll talk about another guy there in tier three that the same thing happened. He was
Mhm.
finally doing the thing that we wanted Jalen Phillips to do. We've been talking
Breakout
about
season.
for years. Breakout season. He was getting the play time with the new defensive
Mhm.
coordinator. They recognized his talent, and he was hecking delivering.
They
And
put
then
him in the
obviously
right
out
position.
exactly, and then out for the year, which it'll be interesting to see where he lands in the upcoming year,
Mhm.
because obviously he's proven he can do it, right?
Mhm.
Uh, just how much was it an ACL?
It was Achilles, if I
Achilles.
remember correctly.
Okay.
So yeah, because it was he just was coming out of his non-contact injury. So yeah, that's what makes him. He's going to be really difficult here. I would say if people are scared, I would bet on the talent and the body to rebound, because we're seeing that a lot more. Um, these guys are just so advanced. I think it's evolution happening in front of our faces here with these freaking football players. Before an Achilles was a career death sentence. Now it's kind of like, maybe he'll have a slow year one back, and then
Right.
they're perfectly fine going forward. So it's insane. So I'm going to bet on it. I'm not playing scared when it comes to Jalen Phillips. He'll definitely, I think, enter tier one. He's probably going to be our TJ Watt next year. He's going to be at the bottom
Mhm.
of tier one because we're unsure what to think of for the injury, and he'll probably smash the return that he gives. So that's where I'm at.
For sure, for sure.
The next guys there in Brian Burns and Hassan Reddick were kind of disappointing this year. So Burns finished 29th in points per game, just under 10, 9.875. And Reddick was 38th at just under 9 points a game at 8.941. So Reddick, we could start with. We knew he came out of the gate slow with the cast on his hand, was not even giving us tackles in the first couple of weeks, let alone sacks. So he was like zero burgering you. We said to kind of, try to weather it, wait till this cast comes off, and then week 4 it did, and he came back, with like 2 sacks, I believe. So he the 3 weeks were a little tough to eat. And then, yeah, if he wasn't giving you sacks, he was pretty much giving you nothing, which was kind of his MO even prior to this. He was just so consistent with the sacks last year that it didn't matter. So, yeah, Reddick, pushing 30, someone who I'm probably dropping down my dynasty rankings here going forward. Burns, on the other hand, I'm probably going to leave him close to where he is, because I'm hoping that this year was just kind of a huge waste and wash for Carolina. I believe, I'm not sure. I can't. I gotta look up his contract status, because I was trying to remember if he's playing for a contract or if they already gave it to him. But he was, rumored to be, potentially traded mid-season. So I'm gonna just kind of hold on Burns. Hope that this year was kind of just a shit year for that entire team, and expect him to rebound a little. So how about you?
Yeah, so he is an unrestricted free agent. Brian
Okay.
Burns is so playing for a contract. So hopefully, he gets on a better team.
Let's
Uh,
hope he gets the hell out of Carolina.
that he's currently on. So yeah, Reddick, obviously disappointing year. Those first few weeks were
Mhm.
just absolutely brutal, and then he exploded in the middle there, and then kind of
Mhm.
really fell off there at the end. One thing about him though, why we had him in tier two, just his ability to get after the quarterback. He did end the year with
Mhm.
11 sacks, double-digit sacks.
Yep.
That's not a fluke.
Yeah.
He's still very good at doing what the Eagles are paying him to do. It's just
Mhm.
the tackles went way the heck down.
Yeah.
Went all the way down to 38 combined, which, yeah, you need that floor of tackles to be good,
Mhm.
and he just didn't have them. So, tier two is probably right. Probably maybe tier three next year, just due to age
Mhm.
and, this dip in production. But, 11 sacks, that's still obviously way IDP relevant. Just there are some folks, some of these young folks that we'll get to that are, performing like we want them to coming into their NFL bodies. So disappointing year for Reddick. If you
Mhm.
trusted him for those middle weeks, you're happy.
Yeah.
But just disappointing overall. And then Brian Burns, like you said, he played all 16, or he played 16 games. Just
Mhm.
overall, kind of fell off. Well,
Very lumpy.
and by fell off, like he went back to about his average stats. So
Right.
obviously 2022 was a breakout year with 12 and a half
Mhm.
sacks and 63 combined tackles. Uh,
Mhm.
on average, though, he averages about 8 or 9 sacks and
Right.
averages about 50 combined tackles, and that's what he did, right?
Mhm.
So for me, this might not be he just had an off year. I think this just might be he regressed back to what
Mhm.
he is, right? So obviously
Exactly.
we will be paying attention to where he goes, because obviously change of scheme, change of
Mhm.
usage will absolutely impact his IDP relevancy. But he's earned himself, I think, a pretty decent
Mhm.
contract there. If I'm the Panthers, I'd probably keep him. He's one of the few folks on there that you can maybe
Mhm.
convince yourself to sort of build around on that defense. But yeah, we'll be on the lookout for you.
Totally. Reddick, on a 1-year deal as well. So he might be in a new uniform next year, depending on his contract demands, we'll call them. So, yeah, it'll be interesting where we see either of these guys, if they're still with the teams they played for this year, or are off to greener pastures. That will likely impact the rankings as well.
For real.
Um, much larger tier 3. So I'll say the names here. We had Aiden Hutchinson, who finished 10th, 12.68 points a game. Daniil Hunter, who finished 5th, 15.5 points a game. Matt Judon, who got injured but still finished 8th in points per game at 13.75. Then Kayvon Thibodeau, 28th at 10 points even per game. Joey Bosa, 33rd at 9.2 points a game. And then Uchenna Nwosu, who finished 41st at 8.667 points per game. So I'll quickly do where I was dissenting in this tier. So I
Mm.
had Kayvon Thibodeau in a tier 2 guy, huge whiff there. I had Joey Bosa and Uchenna Nwosu in tier 4. Now, I was not doing that off of predicting injuries, but you could see even by their points per game and their finishes that those were probably better calls for me. So anybody you want to call out here?
Yeah, I mean, the resident Pats fan here, man, Judon was
Yeah,
doing it. He
it
was
was
really doing it.
justified.
And
Hmm.
then he got hurt. Uh,
Tier 2.
I guess the only benefit of him getting hurt when he did, and being out for the year right off the bat, is there wasn't have to waste an IR spot to keep him around. Um, but yeah, that's just a brutal blow for my Pats. No, other than that, yeah, these tier 3 guys were in tier 3 because they had the ability to perform really, really highly, right?
Yeah.
And for those that didn't watch our episode in July when we did this, we were sort of given these 20 names that we care about for many different reasons, and kind of asked to put them into 5 tiers, right?
Mhm.
So it wasn't necessarily that we thought these were the top 20 guys. It was just a conversation, like, where would you rank these folks in these tiers? So these tier 3 were like, okay, I'm not as confident that they are going to be able to be consistent producers there at the high end, but we like them better than the names beneath them. So getting
Mhm.
that out of the way, I think for the most part we nailed it.
Yeah.
All these guys were fantasy relevant. I
Mhm.
did not see Daniil Hunter going the heck
Yeah.
off like he did.
Yeah.
Color me surprised. I still think I'll have him in tier 3. I would bet that he's not going to repeat it. Um, but hey, good on you. Good on you there. I think the main storyline for me there is the Aiden Hutchinson versus Kayvon
Mhm.
Thibodeau sort of thing. Both coming out the same year, both
Mhm.
super young, obviously very relevant in dynasty and redraft alike.
Mhm.
But really love to see the huge uptick in production
Mhm.
from Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah.
Finishing 10th. Yeah, he's going to skyrocket up for
Mhm.
me in terms of especially redraft tiers. But dynasty, you were holding on to him the entire
Yeah.
time anyway. It's just it finally paid off, right? And you love to see that versus Kayvon Thibodeau. Not
Mhm.
really ascending in the same way. I know many
Mhm.
thought that he might actually be higher upside than Aiden Hutchinson in the NFL. Has
I
yet
did.
has yet to materialize.
No.
Um, still finishing 28th though, in terms of
Yeah,
our
it's not like
points per game. Like he's not a bum. Like
right.
he's not like a huge bust. But it's still just like, oh, maybe we should start tempering expectations for him.
Thibodeau's one of those frustrating guys that kills you the weeks where he doesn't do anything, but then helps you win the weeks where he goes off. So Hudson's sort of like that too. He's kind of boom bust, but he just had more boom going on this year. But both of them still wildly inconsistent. Hutchinson definitely will be entering tier 2. I think I'll probably hold pat with Thibodeau in tier 3. Although I had him in tier 2 last year, so he'll be dropping for me personally. I think he'll stick with the consensus rankings into tier 3 there. Danielle Hunter, I don't know, man. I might have to, disagree a little bit on that one.
You're on him.
I
You're
think he
on him.
might be bottom tier 1 there, at the very least top of tier 2. Yeah, the age is getting up there similar to Watt, but I don't know. I think his behind the scenes, he's a PFF darling as well. So behind the scenes, the kind of peripheral metrics have been there for quite some time here. So he just he just needs to keep up the production there. So I think his contract might be another one where he might be in a different uniform or needs to sign a long term with the Vikings. So that could affect things slightly there, but yeah, I don't know. Hunter's always had this in him, and we finally just saw a monster season come from him this year. So, yeah, Judon, it's tough with the age and sustaining the injury. Probably stick holding tight there. He's definitely got more upside than most guys for this tier, but yeah, it's just tough that. And then Bosa and Nuoso for me. Nuoso's a little younger, but they're probably sticking pat for me as well. With the emergence of Boy Mafe and Daryl Taylor, did pretty
Mm-hmm.
well there. They have the rookie second rounder. We can't forget that Derek Hall was a second rounder. So, Nuosu might be I know he just signed a pretty decent contract, I believe, in this offseason. So I don't know if he'll be going anywhere, but he might just be relegated to more of a rotational guy than he even was previously. So don't love the outlook. And then Bosa, the age and the injury, I don't love it there.
Yeah, 2 straight years of injury for Bosa, for Joey Bosa. That is like
Yeah,
it,
Joey.
it's just not a good. It's not a good spot. It's not a
Mhm.
good spot for him, given I mean, he's not old. How old is he? Oh, yeah, he's getting up there. Yeah, in
Yeah.
terms of football age, like I don't know, it's
Yeah.
disappointing for
Yeah.
such a great talent to kind of fall off the wayside there. So yeah, I'll leave someone else draft him. Then Uchenna Nuoso, you know, he obviously had a huge year in 2022 and kind of
Right.
became IDP relevant. And we're gonna make the same probably mistakes next year. Full
Mhm.
transparency. Someone had a great year this year. It's like, oh, he finally broke out. He'll keep doing it. Yeah,
Mhm.
he just fell back down to where he has been, for his career. So
Mhm.
rightfully going to be putting him down the ranks next year.
Absolutely. All right. Is that good for tier 3?
Yeah, let's move
So
on to
I
tier
guess
4.
if I'm reordering this, I think it
Oh,
definitely stays Hutchinson Hunter. I think it stays in the order that it is, to be honest with you.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. All right. All right. So that'll bring us to the tier 4 names. They were Josh Sweat, Rashawn Gary, Aziz Ojulari,
Oof.
and Will Anderson. So they finished. Josh Sweat finished 50th, just over 8 points per game. Rashawn Gary 40th at 8.7 points a game. Aziz Ojulari, ton of injuries, and even when he came back, he was trash. 102nd at just 4.36 points per game. Will Anderson 32nd at 9.26 points per game. I don't even know where to start here because this was kind of a weird tier. Josh Sweat was here because he popped off last year, but we kind of assumed that he might regress a little bit in terms of his peripherals there. He was converting the sacks at a ridiculously high rate, kind of nailed that. Rashawn Gary was there because of coming off injury. We loved his talent, but weren't sure how he was going to be worked back. He was averaging in like the 60s as far as snap counts, had some monster games, but when he wasn't having monster games, he was giving you pretty much nothing at all. So kind of nailed that. Azeez Ojulari, I think we were projecting just kind of a breakout this year. You actually had him a tier lower, which was a great call. He did suffer injury that consumed most of his season. But like I said, even when he came back, he was not doing anything at all. No tackles, hardly, and I think he finished the year with maybe a sack. So big whiff there. And then Will Anderson, the promising rookie, I had him in tier 3. I really liked him this year, and I think the tier 3/4 kind of towing the line was about appropriate for him with where he finished. Started off great, but definitely went through multiple week spells of falling off, no production. And then when he came back and gave you really spike, he was kind of like and yeah, they finished very close to each other. He was kind of like Kayvon Thibodeau Jr. Had some massive weeks for you, but then really wasn't helping you when he wasn't getting sacked. So I think these were all kind of justified. Anderson definitely moves up. Gary probably moves up. Sweat stays about the same, and Ojulari moves down for me. So how about you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Will Anderson had the exact kind of rookie year that we expect him to have. And as we get into more draft coverage, temper your expectations with these rookies. It's very, especially on the defensive side, it's other than the cornerback position, it's difficult for rookies to get the play time and get the consistency you want to be super IDP relevant, especially in redraft. Obviously, Dynasty is a different animal, but this is exactly what you want to see from your rookie edge rusher, right? He's a force. He's getting to the quarterback. He's getting some of those stats. I mean, finishing 32nd, that's great, right? Like that's a edge 3. If you're playing in some of these deeper leagues, like he's doing what you want him to do. Sky's the limit for him. He definitely got better as the year went along. If you remember, Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, very similar, trajectory. Their rookie years, very, very up and down, especially Hutchinson, right? And obviously Will Anderson is regarded as a better prospect than even them, right? So temper expectations. This is the exact year you want. The plan is in motion for Will Anderson. Azeez Ojulari did end up with 2.5 sacks. He had 2 against the Eagles last week.
God.
So week 18
saved it. Yeah.
I mean, he didn't save anything. He was terrible. I think, kind of like me and girls, stop trying to make fetch happen. Like, I think I'm finally off the Ojulari train. Like, you gotta. I think it's not happening. Really, just disappointing. And those edge rushers there in the Giants. Really thought Thibodeau and Ojulari would be the nice 1-2 pair. Kind of like Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati, where it's like, you both can be relevant. You're both going to do it. Just disappointing all year. Rashawn Gary is so hecking frustrating because he's so good when he plays. And we thought they'd ease him back. And we thought the entire year they were easing him back with his low play count. He averaged 53% of defensive snaps this year. The issue is it just never went up. He was never eased back. The Packers were very comfortable giving him mid-50s to 60% of defensive snaps every week, keeping him fresh. And when he hit, he obviously hit, and that's huge. That's really nice. But you don't get the kind of numbers you want, like those Max Crosby, obviously super insane tackle numbers and sacks if you're not on the field, and you'll be invariably more boom or bust. So I will probably keep Rashawn Gary in that tier 3 or 4 in this list because it's hard to trust. Like he'll have weeks where he can help you win. He'll have weeks that he put up a big old goose egg. Just very frustrating usage. Obviously, the Packers don't give a hoot. They don't give a hoot about us in IDP. He's doing the work, and the Packers keep winning. So great. And then Josh Sweat. The Eagles' defensive line is just very good. They're very talented. They had a historic year last year. He popped off because everyone popped off. Kind of fell back to earth a little bit this year, and by a little bit, a lot of it. So it's tough projecting. It's kind of like, talking about the Packers on offense, the wide receivers right now. They're just a gluttony of great players who are all very good. You just don't know who's gonna be the guy. Like last night, it was Romeo Doubs. Cool. Drayden Reed was held. Pertney was out of catch. Did he have it? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think he had like one.
He was the guy. He was the main dude. And then they said, heck it, they're not covering Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs is the guy. right? So the same thing is happening there on that defensive line with the Eagles. So not overly surprised he underperformed. It's definitely still relevant, but I think the shine is off the like, oh, he's going to explode.
Yeah, I think the two most exciting guys from this tier to talk about are definitely Gary and Anderson. So Gary, with his, coming off the midseason knee thrashing that he had, did only end up averaging about 53% of the snaps. Prior to that, it was 70% and 68. So I hope we get back up to that 68 and 70 range next year, which they paid him a shit ton of money off the injury. So I think they're going to expect that too. So he's probably in line for another decent value in your both redraft and maybe dynasty startups, because I think people are going to see this finish, see those snaps, and kind of not look at the bigger picture and the context surrounding why that season happened. So I think he's almost weirdly an excellent buy low candidate in maybe more of your like casual leagues where, because if you're playing with crazy degenerates, nobody's giving up Rashawn Gary for cheap. And even in a startup, he's probably going to go at an appropriate value, depending on the scoring, of course, like in this, tier 3 to 4-ish range of edge rushers. But if you could get him, in a more casual league, you could probably send like a third for him and get him, which I think would be great value. And then Anderson, I have him in the same tier as the elite guys. So for Dynasty, I have him in tier 1 with the guys. I think I'm going to stick to that. He only played, I'm going to say only, played 63% of the snaps this year, and all of them pretty much on the defensive line. I thought he might be more of like a hybrid, linebacker type, kind of like a Parsons in his rookie year type. And they're just throwing him right onto the defensive line with not having to worry about anything else. So I don't know. I think if we can get the snaps up, maybe he'll have more opportunities there to set a more of a safe tackle floor. But I don't think I'm going to back off the elite tier for fantasy until I'm going to give him another year next year. So at the end of next year is when I'll really have a much firmer stance. But I still believe in the ridiculous talent there. So those are kind of my takes on those two.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Dynasty tier 1,
Yeah.
redraft probably tier 2 because we just haven't seen it yet. Kind of probably
Mhm.
the similar trajectory that we had with Aiden Hutchinson there, where it's
Mhm.
like, yep, we'll keep moving him up, and
Totally.
then he keeps proving it, and then we'll keep moving him up. So,
Totally.
yeah, sky's the limit.
All right. Our last tier, we threw in a couple rookies to talk about because they were hot names, first round draft picks. So in tier 5, we had Will McDonald from the Jets and Tyree Wilson. I'll just take my gigantic L here. I was a huge proponent for Will McDonald, primarily in Dynasty. I'm pretty sure I was a little more pragmatic on a redraft sense, even though I had him up into tier 4. I really thought he was going to play more, and he just didn't. They really let Jermaine Johnson advance in his development this year as far as playing time. So McDonald only averaged 19% of the snaps. So that huge blow in redraft. But I think we were pretty quick to say, McDonald's not a redraft guy this year. He's a dynasty stash. And I'll still stick to that. But boy, did I think he was going to play a heck of a lot more than 19% of the snaps. He had a couple games. What did he finish with? 3 sacks in those 19% of snaps. So you definitely didn't pick the right weeks to start him. 14 combined, 9 solos, 5 assists. So pretty much a total 0 on the year from redraft. But Tyree Wilson wasn't far behind him, I believe, right?
Right.
Let me check what his. Oh no! Of course, it's not going to pull him up.
But yeah, Jermaine
Well,
Johnson really took over that role that we thought Will McDonald might. But that's
yeah.
earnestly that it's promising for Will McDonald's status. To be honest,
Mm-hmm.
the Jets have a lot of people; they can't pay everyone. So talking about Jermaine Johnson here, he finished 21st overall in terms of points per game.
Okay.
But look, he had a huge uptick in play percentage. So
Yeah.
Johnson's rookie year only played 34% of snaps. Had a similar 2.5 sacks. Just pretty much nothing. there. And this year bumped way up to 66% of defensive
Right.
snaps. Ended the year with 7.5 sacks, 55 combined tackles, some splash plays. Was aided by an
Nice.
interception for a touchdown there for his points.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
so cautionary tale with Will McDonald there in the sense of not
Yeah.
redraft relevant, but all it takes for talented folks like him is the playtime, and just
Mhm.
the Jets, take all their problems this year out of it. Still had a
Yeah.
pretty good defense, and still a
Mhm.
lot of dogs on that defensive line. So
Very crowded.
all it takes is for a couple of them to either move on for free
Yeah.
agency or retire or any of that jazz. And we'll get into team previews for next year, but Will McDonald's definitely someone's name to keep in mind. But
Absolutely.
definitely, I mean, if you went and got him in redraft, a bust.
He was a week one drop for
Yeah,
sure, and,
yeah,
and I don't think we said otherwise. So
yeah.
I think we're fine. I was very hyped for him this year. I wanted him to have a really strong rookie season, and when you're only being given 19% of snaps, it's impossible.
It's tough.
Tyree Wilson, in comparison, played more than twice the amount of snaps. He was up to 44%, but pretty close to production. Only 3.5 sacks. Of course, his tackles were higher, but 29 combined, 16 solo, 13 assists. So, in comparison, I'm still much higher on Will McDonald than Tyree Wilson, if we want to go there, especially for dynasty purposes. So, despite Wilson getting, twice the amount of playing time, he didn't really do a heck of a lot with it more than McDonald, especially from that sweet, sweet number that we love to look at in sacks, only a half a more sack in twice the amount of playing time, over twice the amount of playing time. So for dynasty purposes, I'm still way higher on Will McDonald than Tyree Wilson. I don't know about you.
Oh, 100%.
All right. So Wilson just kind of feels like he's always going to be this like second fiddle, especially to Max Crosby. And we had the breakout of Malcolm Kuntz this year, third year player for the Raiders, who just went nuts in the second half of the year. So with that breakout, maybe Tyree Wilson, we see regression in his playing time potentially here. So whereas I only expect McDonald to keep going up as the years go forward there. So I'm definitely keeping McDonald way higher there. That ends it for tier 5. Couple honorable mentions that you won't see on this list that probably will deserve to be next year. Khalil Mack had a resurgence this year, albeit anchored by that humongous week 4 6-sack performance, but he still had some pretty strong weeks there after as well. Getting up there in age though. Josh Allen, was playing for a contract this year, went bananas, so he'll get paid by someone. Maybe the Jaguars keep him and pay him, but he'll enter that sort of tier 1 to 2 conversation, kind of towing the line there, I think, next year. Bradley Chubb finished 7th this year, playing the counterpart to Jalen Phillips, so he had a nice little career resurgence there as well. Quickly, Jonathan Greener, Montez Sweat, Carl Granderson, all names that we're probably going to need to talk about for this tier conversation next year as well. So I don't know how you feel about any of those guys, but definitely deserve some honorable mentions there.
Yeah, for sure. All those guys, they're all fascinating, right? Because they've all been in the league
Mm-hmm.
for a minute. They all kind of exploded this year.
Mm-hmm.
I keep saying temper expectations. That sounds like a broken
Yeah.
record, pun intended. But a lot of these folks, it's like if they super outproduce what they normally do,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be silly to expect them to do the same thing all over again. However, definitely worthy. I mean, Montez Sweat, new spot there in Chicago, went the heck off. So he's going to get that play time. He's definitely going to deserve to be in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those other older guys, like Khalil
Yeah.
Mack, like I was huge, right? Like, but would I gamble on him doing it again? Like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't. But
No.
definitely in this conversation, one other name that you did not mention that I think is worthy of some talking about is good old Byron Young, their defensive end for the Rams.
Good
He
name.
ended 26th in terms of points per game.
Nice.
But huge rookie campaign, He played 85% of the defensive snaps
Woo-hoo!
as a rookie, and he produced.
Damn.
Now I don't know how he graded in terms of PFF. If he was good or bad.
Right.
But in terms of people that were definitely not on our radar at all, like he's another one of those talents. Kind of like Will Anderson, the rookie. Like what's going to expect? But he immediately came in and was immediately productive. So
Right.
he might go all the way up for me into tier 3, moving into next year. Just the youth and the opportunity there. So
Love it. Yeah, I'm trying to find Young's. I think it wasn't like a superior grade, but hey, uh, results talk. So I love to mention that name. Yeah, he went skyrocketing up my dynasty ranks there. So yeah,
yeah,
he'll be on this list next year to
him
rank
and
for sure.
maybe George Karlaftis.
Oh, love that. Yes.
Like I don't know, he popped. I mean, maybe recency bias kind of popped off in
Yeah.
the game yesterday.
Yeah.
Looked really good, but he finished 31st in terms of points per
Yeah.
game. Pretty consistent player there on the Chiefs. So some of those again, you can't lose faith
Mhm.
in people we talked about a couple years ago when they were rookies. Like it's so easy to be like, okay, their rookie year they sucked. Get them off the
Right.
table. Let's talk about our young, shiny new people. Like who are the big names coming up in this draft? I've yet to really look into them.
Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah, there's a couple edge rushers that are looking good. So
right, projecting to
Nurse
be top
or
10,
Verse.
top 15.
Uh,
Oh, Jared Verse,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But folks like them, we're going to get all excited about them and we're going to talk
Yeah.
them up because we're going to be talking about them in reference or in comparison to, everyone else in the draft. And like, yes,
Mhm.
he's probably the best, edge rusher in the draft. Great. Temper expectations for fantasy. Give them a couple years for some of these folks. And
Yeah.
now we just can't forget about them. Now they're creeping back up into
Mhm.
relevancy. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm excited. Talking about last year is just making me excited about next year.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, if you're not paying attention, we're pumping out all off season content for you. We're back to firing up written articles. We're doing tier rankings and reviews there, accompanied by video discussions by other members of the team. So just doing great stuff here. So you can get full access to everything, including the written articles, dynasty ranks, all that good stuff over at the website, www.idpguys.org. As you can see, what's been at the bottom of our show this whole time for the audio listeners, use the promo code IDP and the plus sign pod for 10% off any level of subscription on the site. Totally think that's worth it. Even in the off season, you want to give us a trial there for the month, definitely use that code. But we, of course, recommend full year subscriptions, full year access to the Discord, which we help you, especially for you dynasty players, which I assume are the ones watching IDP content in January. Our services there are bar none, some of the best in the industry, full 24/7 access to the staff to help you make your tough dynasty, decisions, whether it be startup, whether it be managing an orphan, managing an existing team, your salary cap leagues. We touch on all of it. We've got so many guys that have come into there, so many managers who, either were novices to IDP, brand new to IDP, and, 2 years, 3 years down the road, they're like, I've won the past 2 or 3 years, thanks to your guys' help. So that's the reason we love doing this. So definitely recommend join the team there. So Matt, I'll let you take it off.
Yeah, come on board. Uh, yeah, we have, like Steve said, we have so much great content everywhere. We have our articles, we have our videos on YouTube. We have, if you're listening to us via podcast, that's great as well. So much of IDP is just paying attention to trends and, staying up on things. And that's what we're going to be doing for you. And you can come along for the ride. Uh, Appreciate having you. Please comment on these things if you have any questions or any type of
Yeah.
content you want us to focus on coming up for the off season. So we obviously have a few more positions that we're going to do these similar reviews for, and then we'll probably get to draft content and all that jazz. But if there's anything in particular you want us to cover, please let us know. We're here. We're here for you, for anyone. Yeah, kind of for ourselves, but for you. So please let us know, and we'll keep on keeping on.
Absolutely. All right. We'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
Peace.
Thank you for watching this IDP guys video. If you like this content and you want more fantasy football content, click here. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos to help you master your IDP league, click here to subscribe.